Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be here. I want to thank Bloom Burton for putting on a great show again. Through disclaimers. So I thought I'd start by maybe giving a little perspective. It's an honor to get to give the opening talk here in the Canadian life science ecosystem. And I was thinking this morning about when we first started the company 10 years ago, and looking at some of the top companies back then. I think Zymeworks was probably one of the top ones. And imagining, hey, what would it feel like to be in that position when you're starting from a small group of, let's say, 6 people? And so here I stand today, and what I'm struck by is that some of the main feelings are exactly the same. And they are that we don't feel like we've arrived at a destination. Rather, we feel like there's a lot more to do, and we're at the very beginning. And we're excited about what AbCellera can be in the future. So today, my job is, as briefly and as clearly as possible, to help you see why we are excited about what AbCellera is doing and why we believe in the future of this company. To do that, I think it's important that we share a common belief in a couple things that sit below the strategy and below the business model. And those are on this slide here. So the first is a hypothesis that underpins AbCellera, and that is the idea that investments, sustained investments, in science and technology are drivers of progress and growth in any industry, and particularly in the industry of life science and drug development. And the second is a philosophy, and the philosophy is that the surest way to create value and growth in this industry, and I would say it applies probably more broadly, perhaps even to your life, is to focus on building strength in the company, on building competence and capacity, and then using that capacity to deliver value to shareholders, deliver value to patients, deliver value to partners, and that's the path to success. So at AbCellera, we are taking a long view on both of those ideas, and we are prioritizing capability and company building first, not as a means to bring forward products, but as the primary objective from which multiple products will flow. Our company is focused on the creation of a class of drugs called therapeutic antibodies. And to set the stage, I thought I would share with you how we conceptualize the entire industry of making drugs. So briefly, you can divide drug development into 3 separate stages. The first stage we call ideation. That is the part where you try to decide what is it that I want to make, what should it do, what is the biological hypothesis, and you define the specification for a final product. After you've done that, you then need to go into the lab, and you need to create the composition of matter, the actual drug substance, the data, all of the characterization that ultimately allows you to file for an IND and take that into clinical testing. And then the third part of drug development is the product testing. And I just want to highlight that the second part, the creation of drugs, is arguably one of the most complex, time-consuming, science-intensive, risky, and regulated product development paths in any sector, full stop. And the other strange thing about our sector is that you spend way less time building and way less money making the drug than you do finally testing the product. And imagine how a sector would, how that is different from, say, the IT sector, where you work on a product, you launch it, you get feedback, and you get to iterate. It's because of that, because of the commitment early to the composition of matter of the product, that we believe that's a part of the ecosystem that has been chronically underinvested. And this graph here is supposed to illustrate that in financial terms. So what's shown here is an archetypical path from an idea all the way through to an approved therapeutic. It typically takes about 12 years. The total investment for a successful therapeutic would be anywhere between, let's say, $500 million and $1 billion. The chance of success of finally getting a drug is likely right around 5%. And once you have done the first part at the very beginning, you've created the specification, you've made the actual drug substance, you're committed, and you never get to go back. So what happens is, companies, and I'm sure at this conference, a lot of the focus is on where the big dollars happen. It's on when you're doing the testing, when you're doing the clinical trials, and ultimately the commercial launch and the sale. And of course, that's very important. But we would argue that it has distracted much of the industry from thinking hard about how can we do a better job of making products that have a better chance of making it all the way, that have a competitive advantage over their peers, and that get to clinical testing and ultimately to approval ahead of the competition. So because of that insight into the structure of the industry, we set out to build a company that was solving the problem of actually making drugs. And we defined a strategy that is very simple. People often talk about strategy as though it's something hidden, something that you can't tell publicly. Our strategy is out in the open, and it is simply invest in people, in technology, and infrastructure, and learning to ultimately aspire to be the best in the world at taking an idea and turning it into a therapeutic that can begin clinical testing, and then use that capability broadly with partners to build a large and diversified portfolio of economic stakes in future antibody therapeutic development. The first part of that strategy is what we call building an engine. So for the last 10 years, we have been hard at work combining technology, infrastructure, facilities, labs, equipment, automation, expertise, and and integrating that together with data science to build a capability, a technology that allows us to go from an input, which is an idea and a specification of a drug, and take that all the way through to a final therapeutic that's ready to start clinical testing. AbCellera, in many ways, is embodied in that box. We think about our company as an integrated engine and a single piece of technology that requires everything comes together right so that we can do that faster and better and at greater scale than has typically been done in the industry. The ultimate functional objective is to be able to do that twice as fast as the average. We could debate what the average is, but it's certainly north of 4 years in the industry today for an antibody therapy. We want to be able to push technology forward to solve problems that have been traditionally intractable. We want to be able to do that at the highest quality, both in terms of the molecules and also the data packages that come together. And finally, we want to be able to do that at unprecedented scale, not just doing whatever it takes to do it once per year, but laying the foundation and putting together the infrastructure that lets us do that tens of times per year in steady state. Why is that valuable? It's valuable because of the graph that I showed 2 slides ago, where we looked at the economics of drug development. So first, one of the things we seek to achieve is speed. If you take a drug and accelerate its development to the clinic by a year, and you maintain that advantage through development, if you just adjust the cost of capital that ultimately comes from the final sales, and you risk adjust that, you can convince yourself that there's about $100 million of gained value per therapeutic. Second, if you're in a race to get a drug to the market, and you get there first instead of second or third, you typically will capture a larger market share, which over the lifetime of a drug easily translates into billions of dollars of additional value for the company. Second, if we are able to develop technologies that allow us to do what has not been done before, we have the possibility to open new markets. And I'll speak maybe in a little bit about the big opportunity that exists in classes of targets that have been well validated and for which there's a lot of evidence that an antibody therapy would be a blockbuster drug and a successful product, but for which the technologies have thus far proven not up to the task of finding the right leads. So there's easily $100 billion of market opportunity that could be unlocked if we can get technology to raise the ceiling on what's possible. And finally, and something we're very excited about, if we build this in a centralized way and we have a business model that lets us connect with small companies, we can save new companies that have innovations and ideas for new drugs the time and money and expense that it takes to build the foundation on which to develop their products. And we estimate that that would save at least $50 million per company that is building something from scratch. And probably what's more important, it allows those companies to level the playing field and work with technology that's at the cutting edge of the industry. The second part of our strategy is to use that capability and to build a diversified portfolio of stakes in the next generation of antibody therapies. We are not dogmatic about the deal structures that we use to do that. And over the past couple of years, we have put in place roughly 3 categories of programs that contribute to that portfolio. Those include partner-initiated programs, where the idea has come from the outside, and that's by far the majority of our work at AbCellera. Those are characterized as discovery programs, which I'll talk about in a second, as well as co-development programs, where we have an economic stake and the potential to invest financially to share risk and reward with the partner. The third class of programs we call pre-partnered programs, and these are wholly owned assets that come out of long-range R&D projects that are underway at the company that seek to enable types of therapeutics that have been impossible to find before, or to be able to do that faster and make best-in-class therapies where we see an obvious opportunity, but where technology has not yet been moved to where you're able to prosecute them. Okay, so I'll step through these. The first one is discovery programs. The structure here is that someone contacts us. They've done the ideation step. They've got an idea for what a therapeutic should be. We engage in a partnership. We get paid typically some upfront payments to do the research work. We deliver back the molecule at a defined stage that's appropriate for the partner. That could be an early lead, or at this point, it could also be all the way to a final drug candidate. And then our partner takes that and does the hard work of developing that through clinical development, and we do not participate in the financing of that activity, but we maintain a stake in those molecules, typically in the form of milestones and royalties. So this is a part of our business that we've been doing since about 2015. We have executed now on, I think, roughly somewhere between 60 and 70 programs with downstream participation. And this is a part of the business with a very high return on investment. So we get paid for the early work, and we don't carry any of the subsequent cost. And our partners move that molecule forward, and we share in a small percentage of the upside. So that's a business that we love. And over time, if you start to do the financial analysis, you can convince yourself that this will grow into a business with a remarkable P&L, but without the big balance sheet required to fund those programs. So that's a business that we love, but it's also a business that has some challenges, particularly in public markets. One of the challenges is that the programs that we work on are the confidential information of our partners, and so we can't disclose much. The second is that the value of the portfolio of programs in this class does not reside with one particular program, but rather is distributed across the set. And so it's really a diversified portfolio of many small positions. And third, of course, the cash flow associated with this part of the portfolio is long-tailed, and it really is dominated by the royalties that come once a drug finally gets to the clinic. That's something that is always challenging in public markets. I would say it's not any different from every other biotech that is moving a product forward, because ultimately in this industry, you don't sell anything until you get approval and you actually get a drug to patients. So this is an important part of our business. It's the highest volume, and it's one that we continue to work on. A second class of partnership we call co-development deals, and they're very much the same. We get contacted by a partner. These are typically done with smaller biotech companies, and the difference is that in this case we start with a 50% ownership in these programs, and we have an option but not an obligation to continue to finance these programs as they move forward into CMC, GMP manufacturing, and the various stages of clinical development. So these are a lower volume part of our business. We have a more concentrated stake, and we have an option, a valuable option, to double down on programs that we've seen in development with management teams that we like, and where we believe where we have high conviction that these can ultimately move forward and get to the market. We've done about, I don't have the numbers up right now, I think we've started 7 of these. So this represents a significant but much smaller number of programs, but every program in here we would say has higher value because of the potential to participate more. Now the third type of program in the portfolio is what I refer to as pre-partnered programs. One of the beliefs that I did at the beginning, and certainly one of the missions at AbCellera, is to continue to invest aggressively in R&D and technology development, not just to do things faster or to do things better, but to do things that thus far have not been possible within the industry, to open up new markets. We have 2 large programs or large efforts in this area. The first is in building a T-cell engager platform, so bispecific antibodies that have the ability to recruit T-cells to cancer as a new class in oncology. And second, a program that's been working now for about 4 years in putting together all the pieces of technology to address complex membrane protein targets that have traditionally been inaccessible. And those include GPCRs and ion channels. When you're working on these types of problems, you need to be working on actual targets. And within these classes, there are dozens of obvious targets that everyone recognizes are valuable. And so as part of this R&D, we are prosecuting these programs, and that has the potential to generate what would be wholly owned assets from AbCellera. The goal of those is not to take them all the way forward and become a vertically integrated biotech company, but rather to partner them at the appropriate stage so that a partner can take those forward. And we view that very much as anticipating the needs where we see a technology advantage and opportunity that the industry doesn't yet see. I mentioned this briefly, but I'll just highlight this one since we just recently presented some data at the AACR conference, where we have, over the last year and a half, built what we believe is a very powerful platform for the rapid discovery of T-cell engagers that includes solutions to 2 of the big problems that exist in this class, and one is controlling the level of activation and cytokine release of T-cells, and the second is in getting greater specificity towards tumors. So to address the activation side, we have now built by far the industry's largest panel of anti-CD3 antibodies, and we have characterized those and demonstrated that the judicious selection of a CD3 in combination with a tumor binding domain can allow you to get potent killing while not getting high cytokine release, which has been one of the primary toxicities for this class. In terms of addressing the specificity, one of the areas we're very excited about is work where we've shown that we can apply our platform to very quickly and easily generate multiple antibodies that are highly specific to MHC peptide complexes, which allows you to go after tumor-specific targets or tumor-associated antigens, neoantigens and tumor-associated antigens that reside within the inside of the cell and are presented on the surface on MHC molecules. So that's a new area and one that we're sort of sorting out, but it is attracting high interest. One of the things I'll say about this program and about the GPCR and ion channel programs is that in addition to moving technology forward, and in addition to validating our platform and attracting partnerships by opening up new opportunities, it's these programs that we have done internally that allow us to present at conferences and show the progress in the platform in moving science forward and opening up new opportunities for drug development. So with that, I'll just maybe sum up a little bit of the business. We started the company about 10 years ago. Our first engagements with partners began in 2016. Since then, we have started well over 100 therapeutic programs. About 69 of those are partner-initiated programs where we have downstreams. 6 are partner-initiated co-development programs, and we recently announced that we have initiated 12 pre-partnered programs associated with GPCRs and ion channels and with DCEs. We are excited about the progress on the co-development programs and also on the pre-partnered programs, and expect that the first of those will advance to the stage of clinical candidate, which is the beginning of IND-enabling studies sometime this year. And so we look forward to updating everyone on that as that progress continues. So we've been at this now 10 years, and I was just having breakfast with some of our leadership this morning, and we said, hey, if we'd understood just how long a road and how expensive and how difficult this was we probably would not have begun. But we naively set out, and through execution and hard work and the whole team pulling together, which is now over 500 strong, we've gotten to a point where we believe we're really in a position to see this through and build an engine at scale that can really make a difference for the industry. Thus far, we have scaled up to about just over 500 employees. Our employees or our sites are now in 4 countries: Canada, the U.S., Australia, and the U.K. We either have opened or have in progress 650,000 square feet of lab space, the critical mass of that being in Vancouver, where we have some big construction projects underway, including building a first-of-its-kind manufacturing facility that will allow us to go not just handing off the composition of matter, but actually making the drug substance and shortening that time from initiation to clinical starts. And all in, I believe we're now well over $500 million of investment to get to where we are, and there's much more to come. In terms of capitalization, we're in a great spot. Obviously, in this market, that's an enviable position to be in. We have over $800 million in cash. We have put in place, very capital-efficient ways of financing, which have included over $150 million in government contracts. And thus far, the company remains 30% owned by senior management and also by directors. I think that's important because what we're trying to build has a huge potential that we see, but it's one that requires time, and we're in a position to make sure that we can see that through to the end and fulfill the vision of building an anchor company here in Vancouver. So what are we doing for the next foreseeable future? We're doing much of the same that we've been doing over the past 10 years. If you look at our financials, you'll see that 2/3 of our investment is in capability building and company building, aligned with the first slide that I put up. So our major priorities there are to continue advancing technology development on GPCRs and ion channels and on T-cell engagers, and also to complete forward integration, including CMC and GMP manufacturing, so that we have completed the vision that we started off doing 10 years ago, which is to build that centerpiece, which is the product invention and creation step. 1/3 of our resources go to partnering, and on the partnering side, we are emphasizing value creation. So not emphasizing short-term metrics of volume or number of partners, but rather trying to connect across the industry and find the opportunities where we've got the best ideas, partners we believe in, good collaborations, and a commercial and competitive advantage that we believe can move a molecule forward. And that matters to us because, as I said, when we strike deals, we do so that our success is directly tied to that of our partners and ultimately to the patients who get those therapies. And so with that, maybe I'll end and take questions. I'll just say one more thing to speak to this slide, which is really, one of the foundations or learnings in building this company is that there really isn't, or at least most times, there is not a rapid path to value creation and to building a great company. I think that's particularly true in biotech. If you look at many of the great biotech companies that have been built over time, you'll see that it typically took, a decade to 20 years to build a company at scale. And the reason is that it's really hard. And so we have set out to tackle a really hard problem, to build this centerpiece that can do a better job in a scalable way of making drugs and make that accessible to the industry. And by solving those tough problems, by doing the work on finding the people, the technology, the integration, the operations, the facilities, we believe we create value, and we have a platform for further growth, and that we also have a competitive advantage because anyone else who wants to follow this has to go through the same path. So that's maybe summed up with, if you want to do something valuable, do something that's hard and is directed towards a real business proposition. So with that, I'll stop, and if I have time for questions, I'd be happy to take some. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. We will now open the room up for questions. If there's any questions, please raise your hand, and we will bring you the microphone.
We got one over there.
Good morning. Thank you for the very informative presentation. I'm from TD Bank. I just had a question.
Sure.
What are some of the key risks in your business that keep you awake at night, and how do you mitigate them?
It comes back to this slide. So, we haven't shied away from doing things that people told us from the very beginning were going to be too hard to pull off. What we figured out is that, here in Canada, if you want to build a scalable company and do the things like the CMC and the translational science and manufacturing to get it scale, it absolutely can be done. But if you're doing it the first time, you will need to recruit people from outside of the country, particularly on the back end. So one of the harder things that we're doing is this forward integration piece. A year ago, that was a little bit hazy. Over the last year, we've made tremendous progress there. So there's been, great success in recruiting experienced, talented leadership in the CMC and the GMP manufacturing. And we now are sort of hitting our stride and rapidly building up the team so that I'm very confident now that we're going to get through that. it's one of these things where it's always hard to start something. Once it picks up and gets momentum, you find that this is actually a great place to do business, and AbCellera has a very attractive profile for those people. So I would have answered a while ago that the risk was in assembling the team fast enough for the manufacturing. And to that we always said, well, if we slip a bit on time, that's okay. We want to do it right. Now I feel like we're doing it right, and we're going to be on time.
Time for one more question.
Thank you for your presentation. My question is, do you have molecules in the clinical trial already? How many? Which stage?
Yeah, so we have put 8 molecules, or there are 8 molecules that have come from our platform that are in clinical trials, all with partners. The 2 most advanced were our antibodies for COVID-19. So we were successful in bringing 2 molecules to emergency use authorization, bamlanivimab and bebtelovimab. Those authorizations have since been revoked because of the emergence of resistant variants. But we continue to work on that, and hopefully we'll find others. In terms of the number of molecules getting through and the pace of that, because we work at the very beginning of the drug development process, when we hand molecules back to partners, it takes time for those to move through the studies and ultimately get to an IND. The programs we did early on, we were handing off very early, and so there was even more work to do. Today, we are engaging with partners and taking things all the way through to the beginning of the CMC, and very soon we'll be doing programs where we take things through the manufacturing as well. And in that case, the delay between doing a partnership and seeing it arrive in the clinic, we expect to be much shorter. So if you think about a portfolio strategy, everything gets started early, and over time, what moves into the clinic are the things you started a while ago, and so we expect that to be accelerating as we do more programs and as those programs start to advance. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Carl.